Welcome, everyone, to the Tethys Shipyards. I am Takeshi Yamato, the Yardmaster, joining our host, the Housecoat Gamer.
Yo.
Today we're taking a look at our next Rebel Star Wars craft, the B-Wing.
Nicknamed Blade Wing due to its rather sword-like, well, lower section, and looking like a B when those S-foils are in the downward position. The B-Wing was an attempted and failed replacement for the Y-Wing, bridging the gulf, as it were, between the X-Wing and the Y-Wing.
Yeah.
Vane and Corporal really tried their hardest to make this thing good enough as a fighter-bomber.
Yeah.
Armed to the teeth with generally the same armament as the X-Wing, with what appears to be 4 laser cannons on the underside. Well, 2 here, 1 on
And
each
one on
wingtip.
each wing.
An ion cannon mounted in the cockpit section, and a massive ordnance bay inside the blade.
Yeah.
A prototype was in development at the Chantopole facility, but the production variant of the craft would not see service until after the Battle of Yavin.
Yeah.
Of course, the B-Wing suffers similar problems to the V-19 Torrent starfighter used by the Galactic Republic during the Clone Wars.
It is a maintenance nightmare.
Now, unlike the V-19, which has an overly complicated S-foil system, while the S-foils here are certainly still a maintenance nightmare, hinges being structural weak points and all that, now the primary problem is the cockpit.
See, that is a gyroscopic stabilization system, meaning the cockpit can stay in the same position while the craft rotates around it.
To quote a certain doctor from Star Trek, it's a good design in theory, but, well, when things go wrong, they go wrong.
Yeah.
So these things are maintenance nightmares. And while they do continue to see use in production until the Legacy era, functionally they were just outright replaced by the K-Wing bomber, which is far simpler and far more heavily armed.
Indeed. Yeah. And honestly, we must take Rebels into account because the Blade Wing, I do think that can work. And the Blade Wing prototype, oh, geez, that was even more complex because it had a composite beam cannon system. Basically, all those cannons on the wingtip, at the bottom, the wingtips, and at the top, they could coalesce their beams in front of the ship to produce a massive beam of power, which was easily capable of destroying an Architens class cruiser.
With her shields up, I might add. Most people would probably think, oh, the shields were down. They weren't.
No.
Because, well...
Yeah.
To enforce a blockade, you need your shields up at all times.
Yeah. So, yeah, that thing went... oof.
And was one of the few examples of showcasing why Trek is probably going to rip these guys apart if they go up in a toe-to-toe battle.
Yeah.
War shields do not like consistent beam weapons.
Yeah.
Regardless of the problems, the Blade Wing, B-Wing, whatever, hell, you can even call it the T-Wing if you like,
Though I
obvious
think there is
reasons.
a specific
Yeah, I know,
Legends design called that.
yeah, I know, but it looks like a T, so
Yeah, or the cross swing if you want, because it looks like a cross too.
the power of Akbar compels you. Someone had to say it.
Yeah.
Regardless, while it's more heavily armed than a B wing than an Y wing, but it's not as durable. Still, it's going to be an effective little craft, mostly
Yeah.
thanks to that ion cannon. Anyway, moving along to the stats.
Yes, moving along to the stats. We've given this thing a proper entered service date of 2 ABY. So 2 years after Yavin, a year before Hoth, was when the kinks finally got worked out. And per the standard rules, we've set for these things that equates to 2250. We're counting this thing as a runabout, so we have 30. So we have 34 points to put into this thing. We've decided on the spread of comms 4, computers 4, engines 5, sensors 4, structure 8, weapons 9. So the engines are, in this stat system, the engines are about as powerful as those of an X Wing, but it's not quite as fast. It's just need to put the points in somewhere, and I figured that works. But structure and weapons, obviously. For department values, it has a point each in in con, security, and engineering. For weapons, it has laser cannons, ion cannon, proton torpedoes, and concussion missiles. Descriptive, just talents, it has improved hull materials instead of improved hull integrity, and a rapid fire projectile launcher instead of rapid fire torpedo launcher because, well, torpedoes, missiles, it has everything. And for special rules, it has a hyperdrive, it has the standard Wars deflector screens, and it has maintenance nightmare. Engineering tasks to repair the B Wing have their difficulty increased by 2. Extended tasks for the same purpose cannot have a work track lower than lower than 15. Work track is basically how you progress an extended task in STA. You can it's sort of like doing an attack on the problem. You make your check, then then if you succeed, you roll a number of challenge dice, and any numbers that come up, you basically subtract those from the work track total to see how much progress you've made. There's also things like breakthroughs and magnitude and all that. And a magnitude of 3. Okay. And lastly, the descriptor trait is Rebel Bomber. Because technically, this is basically a bomber.
I believe its closest counterpart in our real world would be the A1 Sky Raider. Though
Right.
I think the a A4 Skyhawk might also be applicable.
Yeah.
Still, as ridiculous as this thing is, just the cockpit. Why bother?
Yeah.
I mean, sure, in theory, it eliminates spatial orientation, but disorientation, you get the idea, but it might not work in practice.
Yeah.
It's kind of like those. It's kind of like double cannon gun tanks. Sure, awesome
They
in theory, but
do they really work? And one last thing must be mentioned about the original Blade Wing prototype. Go down to the bottom of the craft. In the original Blade Wing, that cannon fixture had a second cockpit.
probably
This was,
deleted just to add more firepower and reduce headaches for the maintenance personnel.
yeah. And it was the second gunner was also there for the composite beam cannon, which obviously got removed from the final product.
For sanity's sake.
Yeah.
Regardless, that is the B-Wing. Flawed, but dangerous.
Yeah. And and a very strong example of a case where the original developer forgot the cardinal rule of engineering. Keep it simple. Stupid.
Bye-bye.